I think what many of us sometimes forget, that in the next 2 to 3 years, about $80 billion plus worth of contracts are coming up for renegotiation. What does that mean? That means that there's a significant amount of value that could be had on both sides, right? So this is not just about the buy side getting value, but also how does the supply side get value of these vendor relationships, these vendor management.
I think trust is very key from a leadership perspective. And how do you create it? Full transparency is key when you're working with your strategic sourcing partners. Bringing them early into the fold also creates a lot of trust from a relationship perspective. And actually telling them what the issue is and how they can help right away with that collaboration and communication. And being very, very clear on the outcomes that you are driving to bring them as a part of your team. Like they're a part of your team. Bring them into your staff meetings and actually include the partners. I think that is very key with building trust and transparency from the top down.
Do you feel or do you find that there's parts of the organization that resist that?
Yes.
So does procurement or somebody else resist that?
I am procurement.
Yes. Well, we're going to have an interesting dialogue, right? So that's a great question, Atul. Parts of companies do resist that because I think it's a new mental way of thinking. It's a change and a cultural shift with how we think, how we do business, and just the world is evolving. And it's about relationships. It really is. And I think folks miss that a lot. They really do in life.
Yeah, I agree. And from a procurement perspective, well, we have 3 major domains. The first one is the typical procurement or buyer type of activity, which is very transactional in nature. Then we have a strategic sourcing, and then we have the vendor management or the governance of that relationship. Now, what is important, at least at the Citibank, is how we enable that relationship of trust with our key suppliers and make sure that they are enabled to identify opportunities on our behalf, but also engage in the right operating model to unlock that additional value that we maybe not see as procurement.
How do you do that?
So there are many ways, and I am just piling up on what Rhonda said, is be very transparent, be upfront in the process, basically sharing what is the problem, what are the challenges that we are facing, and it is not always about cost. Right? The conversation may start with cost, but we need to look at beyond that, the pricing component or the cost. And it's basically enabling and having the same the partners in the table with us, identifying the opportunities and understanding the strategy and the reasons why we are trying to get them involved and solve a problem.
Can you use examples or tell us stories about vendors that have done a great job of creating trust with you and your organization?
Do you want to take it?
Yeah, I have a couple. One is recently, and we went into this we started a conversation about how we can reduce cost because of all of the cost pressures that we are facing in the industry, right? So
it was a big check you guys are going to write to the federal government.
And we were looking into, existing relationship, but we were looking to get savings in the amount of $100 million for one particular year. So the way that we went through that was basically bringing the supplier, sharing from their point of view, what were the opportunities that they see. After we have the initial dialogue, then we identify and classify or prioritize those initiatives. And we got executive sponsorship. So and it was high up in the bank, to get them their support in the initiative and putting the right resources in place to enable that potential opportunity. So just by having that behavior from the supplier, that build that trust that we don't have probably with other suppliers, because they were open and say, well, we know that you are facing a financial challenge right now, but instead of just cutting rates, we want to go through a holistic health check of the relationship and identifying holistically opportunities that will give you more than what you are looking at.
Are there some examples you can use that can tell us that they came up with?
Yes, three, and this is maybe typical levers that we use, right? Is finding the right location for some services that we currently buy from them. And it was less profitable for the supplier, but they were willing to put the services in a different, or relocate services to another low-cost location with a medium long-term view of the volumes that they will receive.
I've seen it work well in so many different arenas when a partner is more strategic and proactive versus reactive. I think that is a key that in life too, you should be more proactive than reactive. But honestly, when you sit down and think what works well, it's when someone has come to you and said, look, you're having this issue. I see it happening all the time. I'm not really in that space, but I can help you end to end. And it's not a sourcing play or a cost-effective play, but they're coming to the table and they want to help from an end-to-end perspective and not just specific niches. So I've seen it work well. And I encourage on the supplier side you to keep that in mind when you're trying to solve a problem. Do not lose sight on trust, on how important that is. This is not about a cost play or a mess for less. This is about, seriously, your relationship. And the more I encourage you to think of your Rolodex, the last time you just picked up and said, how are you doing? Instead of just calling when there's a problem.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest successes in a relationship we find is when the buy side is very cognizant of what makes their partner profitable. Because smart clients recognize that a profitable vendor is a better partner, right? Why would you want to continue to do business that's where the profitability is declining? So being aware of those drivers really matters. So it's things like sometimes you want the right cost points, you need to move the location where you're going to get the services from because the existing location can no longer afford to provide at that cost point. What are some of the key issues that you see in terms of vendor management or managing a vendor relationship? What would be the top two issues that you find?
Just a couple. Well, there are a lot, but I will mention just a couple. First of all, is not building the right organization at the right time. So it's basically just waiting until the contract is signed or the relationship is established to build the vendor management organization, or thinking that is the right time to start.
By the way, Juan got very excited when we said we're going to talk about vendor management.
So that's one pitfall. So what I usually try to advise and basically partner with the different groups that I support is how we, since the beginning, start thinking on vendor management. Start thinking on where this new relationship or existing relationship fits in the global delivery model.
So Juan, what's the issue? Is the issue not having the right people or not enough people? Or what is the issue?
I think it is not having the right people, but not having a clear understanding that the relationship or the work will change and that we require specific roles or talent to manage the relationship.
Just because you did a contract today, agreed to certain service levels, reality is even literally 2-3 years down the road, the needs change.
Absolutely.
Having the flexibility to change those service levels for both sides, right, matters.
It's very important. And I think that's new that we're seeing in the industry. You just don't sign a contract, put it in the drawer, pop it out. Those days are gone, 10-year big deals that everything's gone to one particular sourcing. But that's the wave of the past. And it's important that people understand from an agile perspective and a different mindset that you need it to be evergreen and refreshed. You'll be surprised how many partners don't know what's expected of them.
Yes.
The contract was written so long ago that you need to refresh it and get everything out on the table. Get those elephants on the table and work through it as a partner of trust. I think that's very important.
How do you take a corporate objective, right? So it's very easy to say we have to reduce costs, so we're going to use outsourcing. But what are some of the other objectives, and how do you take that and make sure that gets into your vendor renegotiation? Or do you do that? Or maybe
so
not?
renegotiations in the past, it was all about pricing, cost, how we get much more from this supplier at a lower cost. That, in my opinion, that is something from the past. We cannot just focus on pricing anymore. we need to look holistically at the relationship. And when we enter into a renegotiation, we need to look into efficiencies that we will get from the supplier, potential business realignment of that supplier, if they are good doing testing services or providing clerk services, collections, etc. We need to position that supplier or put back that supplier into that space, and also look into additional opportunities, volume that they can get, well, the supplier can get at a lower cost point. And the third component is making sure that we have a clear understanding of the past history that we have with that supplier and how we can leverage potential opportunities, or we can cost out excess services that we don't really need at this time.
What is your strategy? You need to sit down and actually look at what are you trying to do with your overall roadmap across end to end. Is that partner or partners, who are the top ones and why? And why do you bring them into the fold and actually debrief them on your strategy? Some of them, from a renegotiation perspective, will say we can't even live up to that anymore on where you want to go. And I think respect that more when that happens during renegotiation, when you know it's bad for either side, and actually put that on the table. But understanding where you want to go is very important during a renegotiation. And is that partner able to get you to where you need to be strategically? It's not about just tactical things. Production efficiency, meaning can you cut 15% while you're actually even reinvesting or putting money back into the environment on the saves that you have, looking at that from a renegotiation, self-funding things. How are the lights that, any company that you're operating, you're keeping the lights on, you're keeping it on, how can you reduce those costs by taking those costs and reinvesting them? Who's going to help you with that in the industry? There's different dynamics of that. And when you enter into a renegotiation, you're looking at multiple facets.
You're both on the buy side, right? So imagine, and there's a number of vendors on the other side. Imagine if they're coming to you on May 1st. So they still have 3 weeks to go, right? What should they be? And they've been working for you for the last 4 years, since it's a renegotiation, right? What should they be coming with? What should they be doing in the next 3 weeks? What should they come with to be able to continue being a long-term partner for you? Three quick bullet points.
Opportunities that they see that we don't probably see, and quantify those. Then come back with best practices, and be willing to sit down in the table and negotiate or renegotiate the relationship. It is surprisingly, or I see very often, that even the supplier knows that we are going to enter into a renegotiation, and they are not prepared enough, and they just sit and they wait us to tell them how to negotiate or what we expect from them. So they need to be more proactive.
What would be the clues from Rhonda?
Quicker than 3 weeks, 6 months at least. Don't like surprises. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats within the industry and internal to the company.